gente. Hola, hola, hola. Voy a dar la charla en inglés, con mi acentaco de España. Paciencia, lo pone ahí, 53 diapositivas en menos de una hora. Let's go. Okay, what is this talk about? It is a compact, really compact revision of major animation styles, rigging methods, and pipelines for games. Most likely you will not get new things if you already know these concepts, but I'm just showing you all of the concepts. And then you can go and study deeper. I'm giving you also some bibliography at the end. This is just to have an overview of how you can tackle animation afterwards. From 2D to 3D, blend shapes, sprites, procedural, shaders, and when to prioritize each one. So, I will start with an introduction, who I am, why I'm here, what are animation styles, methods and pipelines. It's going to be a little bit technical, but I hope you can follow, or at least, if you don't remember what I'm talking about, you will have access to the slides at the end of the presentation. It's online. And then how to set up priorities in the game development pipeline as an animator. So, content warning, there are a lot of GIFs, and I needed to compress them a lot, so they are kind of crunchy. Okay, let's go. I'm Cassie. I'm a developer for 3D digitization, which means I am a 3D artist at the Stiftung Preußischer Kulturbesitz, or the Institute for Cultural Heritage in Prussia, at the State Library in Berlin. I'm also the co-organizer of the FemDevs meetup. I've been told to put the microphone closer to my mouth. Not to confuse with the FemDevs, who are somewhere there in the associations corner. We are different organizations. I am in Germany, and we are organizing only in Germany and so on. I'm a technical artist and animator for games, been in the industry for 10 years, and I'm a project lead and artist for Trece Rosas, which is a horror adventure game about the Spanish Civil War. Easy topic. We are co-founding a cooperative called Achtung Autobahn. I will talk about it a little bit more in detail. So, what do I do at the State Library? Well, first, get a salary. I model, I texture, I animate digital versions of cultural heritage artifacts. This is currently for a project of a collection of pop-up books from the 19th century till the mid-20th century, working towards creating a standard for 3D digitization for public archives, specifically for how to do animation and implement them and make them available in digital archives. A screenshot of a work in progress. Am I hiding it with my big head? Okay. The FemDevs meetup is a networking community for women and other marginalized genders in the German games industry, so very much alike like the FemDevs here in Spain. We do on-site meetups in Cologne, Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, and Berlin. An annual FemDevs Game Jam. It's going to happen in 2 weekends again. A welcoming Discord server where we share tips, job postings, pet pictures, of course, and we rant a lot. This is a picture of the last Game Jam. We allow everyone in, but we just want a background check for the cis men that want to attend. Game development. I've been an art director. I've been making a lot of shaders, very complex rigs, tooling for art and animation pipelines. Animation teacher for a couple of years. It didn't pay well because I was in the private university, so just keep that in mind. The last project that I worked on as a freelancer got released earlier this year. You have the ludography at the end of the presentation. So Trece Rosas is being developed at Achtung Autobahn, which is a workers' cooperative based in Berlin. We are making historical fiction games, such as Trece Rosas. You can find more info in the website, or just ask me afterwards if you lose this link. This is a very German name, but I hope everyone understands what Achtung and what Autobahn means, so you can keep it in mind. This is part of a screenshot of the demo assets from one of the rooms. All right, animation styles. Who can name an animation style? Sorry, yell it. No? Cartoon. Stop motion. One more. I cannot hear anyone. Okay, I didn't expect for to do so much interaction. It's fine. It's fine. Let's just say, first of all, to think for a moment, the animation style could be equal to the aesthetics of motion and also the lack of it. Like silence is part of the aesthetics of music and sound design. The aesthetics of motion in video games are closely related to the game feel. The way something moves will provide a series of experiences. Next question, is pixel art an animation style? Say yes or say no. 50-50, okay. I would argue no, because it is a very, very wide set of art styles that are just put together in a very specific technical way that we will see in the next chapter. Alternative terms that I would suggest when you talk about, I want to make animation in pixel art. The SNES platformer animation, which consists of 2 to 3 sprites for animations per animation sequence. It has this slippery movement, and maximum usually has 4 colors. Or for example, 16-bit 2D fighting game animation, many more sprites per animation sequences than Super Mario Bros. As you can see, rigid fast reaction movements in comparison, it's not as slippery. More colors available, but restricted usually for readability against the background. And this is so to say that you cannot separate animation from implementation or art. What about realistic? Is it a style? Yes, no? 50-50 because I've seen only 2 heads. Okay. What about realistic animation? Let's just compare it for a moment. Boy, are they crunchy. They're canceling animations, so animations to stop one action are different in each of these examples. Their timing penalty is different, especially those that like to play Souls games understand very well the penalty for bad timing. Length of actions is also different. Running for the character in Red Dead Redemption is way slower than for the Jedi protagonist in Jedi Survivor. I think it's this screenshot. You cannot separate animation from design purposes. You cannot separate it from genre conventions. Sometimes you will have to animate in the overall style or something that suggests also part of the genre of the game. In 2 of these examples, Red Dead Redemption from Rockstar, Elden Ring from Software, these conventions are associated to a developer. It's part of their signature. Their movement is very much like, yeah, this is like Red Dead Redemption guys move as sluggishly when it's not for shooting as in GTA 5. Is anime an animation style? Is Disney an animation style? No. No, it's too wide. It's too many decades of animation development. Mickey Mouse in Steamboat Willie moves like a spaghetti, whilst in Fantasia they had already developed this preservation of volume that needs to be in animation. Both of them, sure, they are even the same character, but you need to know the time period of your inspirations and the authors and animation companies, animation houses behind them. To be precise in your work, you need to know the medium of animation and its history. Okay, this is going to take you a little bit of time, but you can start today. An extra take. Do not call it Ghibli style if it's not anti-fascist, because repurposing a style you love is great, but knowing its history and participating consciously in the genealogy of art is even better. Form without substance is just meaningless. And yes, AI is an insult to life itself, as Miyazaki put it some years ago. Nice. Okay. I'm glad I get some applause in this room because who knows who is the audience here. Okay, the medium of animation, we call it medium because it's a mean of communication. And there are many ways to communicate a message to the player in the case of animation for games. It can be explicit, like a character is going like this because they are harmed, or a jumping animation. Of course, it's going to inform the player that the character is jumping. It can be implicit. It can give you information about the personality of this character, and can also imply the overall tone of your game. Is it humorous? Is it a horror game? Is it a drama? Is there tension? It is redundant, and this is also related to one of the animation principles. You shouldn't be subtle in your movements, because when in play, only one way of visual feedback for the player will be completely muddled into all the things that are happening. So a jump needs to look like a jump, and a running cycle needs to inform how heavy the character is, etc., etc. Exaggerate as much as you want, as much as I'm moving my arms today. It is also contextual. Whatever animation you make will mean different things depending on the context. Here's an example. If you don't know these games, it's okay. I hope you know them. The one on the left is a screen cap from Silent Hill 3. Horror game. It's a horror scene. It's a horror environment. Spooky. There's some altar cultish elements going on here, mixed with an abandoned hospital kind of setting. The one on the right is the tutorial world in the first Kingdom Hearts. Now let's say that we put this character in each of these games. You could go around, and these are the credits. You could go around and animate it as the visual design is expected of this cute little thing, and it's just jumping around. Okay, in Kingdom Hearts, you will see it and say, oh, so nice. Maybe try to farm it or something. In Silent Hill, you would see it, oh, little creature, I'm just waiting for you to stab me in the back. The expectations, depending on the context, will provide different meaning to the same animation. But what if you animated it like it's a ravaging creature? In Silent Hill, you would be, aha, I knew it. It was mad since the beginning. But if you saw it in Kingdom Hearts, what will happen? That the player will see it and think, oh no, the animation is broken. They didn't bug fix this. Okay. I'm good on time. Methods and pipelines. Many terms. Not that many GIFs. I will put some. But there are many, many methods. There are sprite animations, like the ones we have seen from pixel art style, that you have to define, but both of them are using the same techniques, which is sprite animation. Skin 2D, Skin 3D, blend shapes, shape keys, same name, different names, same application, different software. Non-skin 3D, it exists. Physics-based, and via shaders, which I will just hint about it, but if I start talking about shaders, we are never leaving this place. Sprites animation means one pose, one picture. All pictures get collected in a sprite sheet. You constrain the character movement with drawbox limits, so it's always more or less the same space. Treat the ground center of mass as a pivot. For example, in Super Mario, Mario jumps, but in the sprite, you're not seeing it 40 pixels on top, right? You just have the sprite, and it is in the part of implementation that the jump animation is made. It's not happening when you are animating, when you are drawing the sprite. Two main workflows, always in power of two. All your textures, all your sprite sheets, all your material normal maps in power of two. Otherwise, your games are going to be huge because compression doesn't work as well. Or it will even break because if you're not using the conventional engines, bugs will arise. Traditional animation, each frame is drawn. Or you could use any other method and then bake it, like render it, put a camera, and render the PNGs into a string. Like, for example, in Donkey Kong Country. These models, they were modeled, they were 3D, but then they were printed on a spreadsheet. I need water. Who knows the power of two? What is the first name? The first number? 1. Let's just start with 2 because computers start with 2. Not really, but like graphics are going to start with 2. Our graphics textures. What is the next number? 4. What is the next one? Huh? 64. You know them all. Huh? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 8,000 is okay. You try not to have 8K graphics images. These are the sizes in pixels of your images. They can be square or they can be rectangular, but they always have to be in power of 2. And this is to balance two issues that we have very broadly in computer graphics. That is, you either abuse the CPU or the GPU. More smaller images, worse for the CPU, better for the GPU, and the other way around, vice versa. Yes, skin meshes in 2D. Instead of drawing each frame, the animation happens by interpolation. So characters are designed and sliced into pieces to assemble them into a puppet. And then the animation is on interpolation. You mark the poses in a timeline. The machine calculates the trajectories it interpolates in between frames. So in traditional animation, if you want a character to do this movement, then you will have to draw here and here and here and here and here and here and here. In interpolation, you only mark in a timeline in the software that you're using. The first movement, somewhere here, no, it's rotation. And the last one, and the machine is just going to draw the frames in between. You are not doing them yourself. This is the difference between traditional frame by frame or via computer interpolation. Good, good. Facial expressions can be animated via card swaps. If you a drawing expression with no interpolation, like in the upper example, which is from Broken Age, it can get more complex by having mouth poses separated from eyes and eyebrows. The rigs can get very complicated, but what is happening here is that the character's movement, the body movement, is happening by adding these bones into the 2D puppets, but the eyes are not blending their scale. They are just being swapped by different drawings from the same texture pack. Okay, this is your average skin 3D is your average 3D character, how it's going to be most of the time animated. So you have a model, you add a few bones, you weight paint the model vertices into the bones, you animate them via interpolation animation in the timeline. You have the mesh, you weight it. It's the wrong order. Okay, you have the mesh, you add the bones, you weight the paint, and you animate it. A little bit of best practices. I'm focusing a little bit more in this because most common case for animators, and many of the stuff that I'm applying here also apply for skin 2D. You need to have a clean mesh, basically because a skin mesh is around 10 times more expensive to render than a non-skin mesh or a static mesh. So it is an optimization nightmare to have hordes of characters or NPCs running at the same time. Is completely different from having static meshes around. You have to apply all the modifiers, pivot point on the ground between the feet. In the case of quadrupeds, you could have them somewhere under the belly touching the floor. For the rig, which is this controller on top of the bone skeleton, you definitely should do the naming conventions, create all the bones on one side of the character with the proper suffix, let's say L, and then you can symmetrize, and this also gets weight painted automatically. You don't have to do the whole weight paint manually for both sides, unless there are some non-symmetric elements in your character. Always have a root bone. Both the armature objects pivot and the root bone are at the same location at the mesh pivot. The root bone will be the character's collision origin, usually a capsule. The root bone is a parent of all other bones, all the controllers and the first bone of the skeleton. Consistent axis direction. If your main rotation movement for the whole arm is going to be the x-axis, then have the x here, have the x here, and so on. And this is why I put this GIF. Every time I try to remember, I kind of forget. But that's why I write it down. I'm really good at documentation. Okay, quaternions are complicated to animate because you tell it to rotate on the x and z axis, for example, and then it does something weird on angles that are above 180 degrees. Why? Because it just calculates beginning and end and then does the spherical LERP, which is the fastest, the closest distance kind of pathfinding. But Euler has another complication, and it's that your animations, your rotations at some point might end up not working. Like if you rotate too much in two axes, and then suddenly the third one is just not working. Because two of those axes are now coinciding in the same direction. So to fix that, this is, by the way, based on Blender. I don't know exactly how it will be in Maya. I haven't touched that program in 15 years. The most important rotation axis will be the first one in order of calculation, then the least important, and then the third, the one in the middle. And do I remember? At this point, yes, because I have explained this too many times. But if you don't worry, you can also do your own documentation. For example, the rotation of the xz in rotation Euler xzy, the bone rotates mainly on the x-axis, sometimes y-axis, but barely, well, this bone cannot do that. So that's why it will be z in the second position. Lock and use transforms on each bone. Like my forearm is not going to rotate in the z-axis at all, so just lock it. Best practices for animation, very quick. Key poses go first. Don't animate the root bone. It is confusing because you say root bone. There is root bone animation in Engine. It's a different thing. So for root animation, which is not animating the root bone, you have to animate the armature object. How did I learn it? Yes. I saw nightmares here. Another method for animation, which is combined with 3D skins, more often than not, is blend shapes or shape keys. One is how it's called in Blender, the other in Maya. Don't ask me which one. I forget every time. Animate vertex or a group of vertices through interpolation between two transforms. This example on the right is that the pupil size is a blend shape. Maximum on the second pose, minimum on the third. And I'm just keying a value between 0 and 1. 0, I forgot in which order, but let's say 0 is the smallest it can be, and 1 is the most dilated eye. It's useful for face animations, like in this example. It means that you will not need to add that many bones. The less bones, the least bones you use, the better, the fewer. Mesh adjustments in extreme poses. Sometimes you want to fix the volume errors from going too far with your rig. It's just like a fine-tuning for your character. You also have to prepare the controllers for that to be easily accessible for animators. In some cases, especially for muscle volume correction, you just automate it. So if the arm extends too much, then it will be correcting itself automatically. You don't have to animate it manually. Non-skin 3D. Why even? Because it's less resource heavy, often used for machinery mechanical animations. Each piece has its rotation direction aligned and pivot points on the center of rotation. I don't know, a windmill, you want the name in English. En castellano dice. You want to rotate the wings? Wings. You want to rotate the wings. You don't add bones, skin the whole windmill, and then animate it. You will just have the pivot point of those meshes separated of the wings, and then say, rotating this axis. Huh? So it's way less expensive for the machine to render that. Pieces are stacked by parenting hierarchy. Of course, the wings will be attached to the body of the windmill. Molino, Sancho. And can still use drivers and constraints. Like, there is no limit to what you can do with drivers and constraints in your animation processes. Hand-yielded objects, by the way, like, I don't know, spades or something that the character picks up, I pick up this bottle, are not part of the character's mesh. They are just attached in the engine to the armature's bone, to the dedicated armature's bone. And that's why things like a character gives an object to another character is so damn hard to implement in video games. Just look at how sneaky they are in The Witcher 3. They have a lot of resources there. They didn't want to have physical interaction between two characters more than slaying each other. You can also have physics-based animation, and this is useful for when you can't control all the possibilities for the pieces animations. Like, it will be on the computer to calculate the movement based on mass and force. Of course, it's computational heavy in some environments, but you are always considering, do I animate it manually and then waste another 5 months of development, or maybe I just ask a little bit more from the computers of the end user? And this is why you are already doing your homework prior to that, and in pre-production decide that the other things about the animation pipeline are done in a much efficient way. So it can stay real time, like the hair or the clothing of Alice. In her second game, it can be pre-computed and baked into an animation sequence. Let's say that there's a cinematic, or you have a target, and if you hit it, the wall falls down. All of these pebbles can be physics-based, but made previously, so they are not being calculated by the player's machine. They are ready. This movement was like baked already. Use cases, as I said, and then via shaders. This is just I don't know, next talk, next year. Mostly common for water effects. This is the most, even if the GIF is freaky chunky, this is the most beautiful water I've ever seen in a video game. This is from Sea of Thieves. Of course, this animation is not happening with bones, unless somebody that was developing it tells me otherwise. Can animate vertices, textures, and material properties. Do with that whatever you want to experiment, but shaders is basically deciding that a vertex in particular, or a group of vertices with a specific color, because vertices have colors, we're just not using them. Nowadays, it will move in a specific way or based on a sinusoidal wave, etc., etc. Much math, much research to do, already a different profession. You're an animator, you're not expected to do water shaders. You're an animator in a game studio, maybe then yes. And the last thing that you have to take into account for deciding on the methods of your animations and how deep you go into your rigs is the point of view and distance the camera from the object that is being animated. If it's a side scroll, if it's top down, if it's isometric, which generally is not exactly because that's a specific projection. If it's perspective, so linear projection. People from technical drawing in high school will understand. If it's this point of view from real-time strategy games or MOBAs, or if it's a first-person shooter, having that into consideration, or a visual novel, having that into consideration, you will go to deeper levels of detailing the animations, or you can have something, or you can have something more distant from the characters. Think how small the League of Legends characters are in a game versus Battlefield. These are render examples for the same object with different projection methods. I don't want anyone out of this talk saying, I want my game to render in isometric, and then refer to the last picture, because there is perspective there. Objects that would be farther away will be smaller, objects that are closer to you will be bigger. There is a three-dimensionality representation there. Whilst isometric, real isometric is the third one in the first row. More often than not, the isometric, still 2D projections are like the one in the bottom. Why am I so picky? Because when you are communicating with the rest of the team and you have so many disciplines talking to each other, you need to find common communication methods. If you say, I want these two colors to multiply, it means something completely different in Photoshop, artist, than in graphics programming. You have to understand that already this exists. Okay. Now think of a game and think of what's its animation style, what technique they are using, which are related but can be completely separated, and what is the point of view from which we see when we are playing it. I will not hear anyone today, I have assumed, but you can tell me afterwards, though. To follow the example that is in this background, this is Harold Hollywood. It's a game that came out, I think, last year, and the characters were photogrammetry. It's claymation, but not completely, because some of the body movement has been made in motion capture, so their movement is very realistic. Their faces swap because they are different models, because they were photoed from actual models in clay motion. So it's a hybrid of techniques, also because if they were to make a game in which also the characters' movements were to be photographed in 3D and cleaned up and so on, they would have taken double the time to make it. And it already took them 12 years to develop. Just saying. It's a beautiful game. Go play it. But the pipelines, game development is iterative. Everyone knows that already at this point. And so is animation for games. So your first animations need to be dirty and need to be functional. And then you can play test. OK, it's too fast. It's too short. It moves too much. It's too subtle already. So you refine it. You send them already dirty but functioning, so it can already be implemented. The design department comes to you. Hey, we have a bunch of character actions that need animations. Then you sketch first pen and paper. No, don't go to the computer directly. Sketch a behavior map of how animation sequences will start, loop, or end. Get some posits and start arranging them. Once you have decided that and communicated with the design department and with programming that this is more or less how they are going to be named, start with key poses, very rough. No secondary or overlap movements, not the little details of the hair, of the clothing. That's for later, that's for refinement. For Skin 2D and 3D, start off with dummy models. So if art has not finished the model of the character, it doesn't matter. You take some, concept already needs to be there, because then you are not working on anything, any foundation. But if the creature is not finished, put together some boxes that have the same proportions and start preparing the rig. This way, programming can start implementing and design can give you feedback on it, because a bad animation is not a badly artistically made. but one that doesn't work for its objective of communicating an action, yeah, refine later. Leave it for later. Don't be ashamed for having cubes moving instead of a proper mesh in the end. It will be cleaner to go through all the processes, and fixing things will not be so painful. And of course, set naming conventions and set deadlines. Don't stay forever on an animation. Okay. Wow, I'm so in time. 12 slides to go. Am I talking too fast? Am I talking too Spanish? Too German? Yeah, a little bit. What are your resources when you are animating in a game studio? The skill or the will to get to that skill? The team or lack of? And time. C capital. Even if you are not putting money in it, you are putting your time. If you're putting your time there, it means that you're not putting your time somewhere else. I don't mean to imply that every single time of your life needs to be spent on getting money, but there is also the time that you need to spend to recover from working. And, don't be too hard on yourself if at the present time you cannot game jam, you cannot produce anything, expand your portfolio. Capitalism happens. What are your responsibilities? Well, it depends. At least as an animator, at least animate the characters, export those animations, import to engine, not implement. Put them in the engine, put it in Unreal, put it in Godot, press play, see that it works, that it didn't bug. That is your responsibility as an animator. You are not an animation programmer, so you are not making the behavior trees unless you decide to. Overlapping functions with art, design, and programming need to have an owner. Somebody that will be responsible, or at least to say, hey, this hasn't been done as I am tasked to at least oversee that it is happening. Somebody in the end has to do it. All the tasks related to the importing part end up need to get a little bit more spread into the art and animation departments. I think being an artist doesn't excuse you from being a little bit technical. You can and should review and correct these divisions of work. So if you decide on something and it doesn't work, then have a meeting with your team and say, hey, I can't take care of this. Or you notice that somebody has too much on their plate and you never get to see a sprint in which you can review your animations because they cannot be implemented. Okay, have a meeting and correct the processes on the go. We don't start pre-production and then plan everything out. Something will happen. Everyone in the team should know how to use version control and log their time. And I don't mean log their time so they can micromanage you. I mean log their time so they actually can guesstimate how much it will take to do the next thing. We get faster over time, but still. Also, we always lowball everything that we are doing. Yeah, this, I can do it in 2 days. 5 days later. So, for the animators, are you also the artist in your team? If so, you don't have time for animations. Just keep animations at minimum. Don't plan big things. Just try to communicate with the very little that you can. You will have to leave implementation to the programmer because already having to do the art, it's like, that should already be more than one person. But also on top of that animation, it's like, so implementation will be put on the shoulders of the programmer. But you import the animations in the engine. Is someone else doing the art? Then take over implementation tasks. The ones that you are leaving to the programmer in the previous example. In this one, learn a little bit how to do behavior tree, a little bit. Learn how to do your behavior trees and locomotion blend shape. What it is, I don't have time, but just check them out. Programmers are the usual bottleneck, but it's not their fault. It's just that if the rest of the departments are not engaging with already some programming Are ready? Yeah. We are in perfect time, But thank you. They are the usual bottleneck, but it's not their fault. The more tasks you take from them, the more time they will have for other parts of the project. Who makes the rigs? Most likely it's you. Learn how to make your own rigs. Art and animation is always has been technical. So, priorities. Unique animations are always a nice to have. I'm sorry. First exception, walking running cycle for a player character, because you're going to see it so much. You better have one that is outstanding from and has the main character syndrome, if you will. Recycle, reuse, keep the amount of rigs at minimum. The most important set of animation is whichever informs the most about player action and context feedback. Details come later. If you have the minimum, it is communicating you have done the minimum necessary for a game to work, for the animation in a game to work. Cutting corners. Do you have cinematics? Illustrations with a bit of camera movement. Don't start making your own cinematics and animating and rigging the characters. Big pass. Dialogue system. Facial body expressions instead of full lip sync. Breath of the Wild and sequel Tears of the Kingdom does not have, except for its cutscenes, because, Nintendo has a lot of money for this, but even the NPCs conversations, you go to any character and they just go, but they don't move their mouths. They are completely static. It's just a bunch of poses that they have established for all of the NPCs. Multiple characters. Everyone shares the same rig. These constrains a lot on body types. So maybe you have 2 or 3 rigs, but no more. Or design it in a way that those body types can also work properly and see the extreme cases for your single rig. Also, I forgot to say, please, no quadrupeds. It's an extra. By the way, the green character that I showed you had 10 feet. It was a nightmare. But it was the only character that I had to animate. So prioritize, because no matter what, something won't make it to release. I'm sorry. Start rough, then polish. And move, as I'm moving a lot today. Dance, do martial arts. I love Taekwondo. Swim or go to Pilates, doesn't matter, but move every day. Yes, this makes you a better animator. If you understand better the movement of your own body, you understand better the movement of everything that you are creating. I don't have a mirror next to my desk, but it's very typical for animators to look at themselves in the face and see how they are emoting and then draw it themselves. This is very classical animation style. Some further reading. These are the basics. Some of them are expensive. Look for them in your closest library. The illusion of life is the conclusion that the traditional animation from Walt Disney arrived to. Almost there. Animator Survivor Kit is a little bit more modern and is a revisit of these fundamentals by someone a little bit more sassy. And game animation, I found this very good addition to the other two, as in these are the rules that break in the context of game development. You don't have to take a picture of this one. These are the video games and films that I showed today. You can take a picture of this. Thank you. Wow. Is there time for questions? Woo.
Hello. Really nice talk. Thank you very much. I'm coming from a background of free-to-play, and I feel there is a small elephant in the room here that I would like to ask, which is UI animations. What do you think should be the person in charge of the UI animations, like the UI artist, the designer, the programmer, or an animator, because it's always there?
I didn't put examples of UI in specific because it's its own level of complication. But I would say it's a similar question. You have to decide in those cases in which more than one kind of type of developer could implement, that you as a team have to decide who is going to be responsible for that. So it's a very big answer, but it's case to case. So if you have a very talented UI artist that is specifically knowledgeable on how to implement those animations, then let them do that, or train them to do that if they are willing to get that extra step. If it's something that, so I have an example from early in my career. I worked on web games, and a lot of the fancy, easy to use engine environments just didn't exist because we had our own tools. And in the beginning, it was painful to leave everything to the programmers, including the layouting, because of course, what an artist would see was not what the programmer saw, and there was a lot of QA going on in this image. This X is not using the hover button, or it's 3 pixels too much on the left. So I would argue that you need then the tool. If you are using an out-of-the-box engine, all of these things are easier, more accessible to someone that doesn't come from programming. So my personal goal will be that the artists in the studio are very tech savvy, so programmers don't have to be everything, because in the end, it's way more work than anybody else's. If you are just making the asset and then dropping it in the wind, somebody has to catch it. And if that somebody is always a programmer, then you are stressing too much those points in development. So long-term goal, prepare UI art to do the animations. And then there has to be, including design, the design department, the responsible person that says, too shiny, or not too shiny as in not pretty, but too shiny as in not functional, please. Lower down the sparkles, kind of thing. Yeah? I don't know. You have the microphone, you choose.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Just
you.
a quick question. Do you have any resources for or any tips regarding procedural animation? In the sense that should an animator know about these kind of things, or should the load be given to programming?
Well, what
essentially?
kind of animation, sorry?
Procedural.
Procedural. It's more of a, in which sense? I mean, procedural as in it happens not by the hand of the animator. You have, for example, the physics space for the hair and for the clothing. So that is its own thing. For destruction animation is its own. In Unreal, for example, you have the baking for those demolitions, so it doesn't consume much real-time rendering time. No?
Perhaps to be more specific, I was talking about maybe the sort of the inverse kinematics or IK of characters grabbing something or maybe walking.
Okay, resources. I'm a very much self-taught. That's why I'm so weird, like somewhere in between technical art and animation. You want to learn to make an IK, then you check for a tutorial on YouTube, and then you see how much it breaks. It's iteration after iteration. I would say lessons, animation lessons for 3D animation. It's one of the principles to learn how to do the rig for an IK. But then the IK for in-engine, that the characters, if it's on a step, the foot stays there. I think that's another edge example in which who is implementing it, a programmer or an animator, and it will depend, or a technical animator, if you have the luxury of having one separated from the one that makes the animations, that they will have to implement that. And that is that is already pure logic animation. It's no longer creating or crafting the artistic part of it. So you want the animator to focus on the expressivity, on the quality of the medium itself, and then have a rigor that also specializes in, for example, the Unreal system for floor IK detection. Thank you for the question.
Well, I wanted to ask just a quick question. I don't know if it's very different to character animations, but I wanted to ask how it works with weapon animations for example, reload animations or shooting animations. Is it very different from character animations, or it's like you also use bones and rig everything by hand?
Can you give me an example?
For example, you want to rig a pistol or a handgun, and you need to animate like the slide or the magazines and that sort of stuff in 3D. I mean,
You have a what? Sorry,
in 3D animation,
3D animation.
you want to you want to rig and you want to animate a handgun or any gun in general, like a pistol or something like that.
Ah, okay.
I mean, it works with bones or.
Depends. I would try to avoid using bones, just because if it's a hard surface, let's say non-skin 3D can have a pass for animating if it's hardcore surface, right? So if the object itself doesn't have this organic movement that depends on the mesh bending in percentages to the bone movement, then you don't need the bone. You can still scale it and do the squish and stretch and still make it cartoonish even without relying on bones. But it depends on how the object. You first have to see the design of it, right? I've done it with and I've done it without.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, okay. Well, that was all the questions. Thank you so much.